Horus Luprecal, the Warmaster of the Imperium of Man and Primarch of the Luna Wolves, has turned his back on the Emperor. After falling to the whims of chaos on the prime world of Davin, Horus leads what is thought of as a small rebellion against his father and brother legions. In today's video, we're going to go into the horrors of Istvaan V, also known as the Dropsite Massacre. And this is absolutely crucial to the Warhammer 40,000 history, as it sets the stage for the galaxy 10 millennia thereafter. But moreover, it's the point in the timeline where it goes from the Horus Heresy to the holy shit Horus Heresy. And at the initial breakout of the heresy, Horus was believed to have really only won over a few of his brother Primarchs and their respective legions, Mortarion of the Death Guard, Fulgrim of the Emperor's Legion, and Angren of the World Eaters. And then, of course, himself, Horus of the Luna Wolves, or Sons of Horus as they were renamed. After the majority of the forces of these legions were culled during the Istvaan III atrocity, the true start of the war, Horus had four whole legions wholly dedicated to him and his cause. So join me now as we go through the horrors of the Dropsite Massacre, starting Istvaan III. It's a smoldering ruin of virus bombs, and Horus has played his first card, and the Horus Heresy is now in full motion. Escaping elements of the traitor legions that remained loyal to the Emperor brought word back to the Imperium of the treachery that Horus had committed. So this is where shit gets wild. The Emperor, not a man for half measures, sends 7 whole legions after Horus to bring him in to answer for his crimes. Now, the leader of this expeditionary force is none other than Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands. And the other boys in the band are Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard, Conrad Kurz of the Night Lords, Perturabo of the Iron Warriors, Lorgar of the Word Bearers, Vulcan of the Salamanders, Alfarius of the Alpha Legion, and a small contingent of Imperial Fists. Now, of these 7 legions, only 3 of them are truly loyal to the Emperor. Horus was also not a man of half measures himself, so he had been planning this for some time, compiling his allies and turning Primarchs over one at a time. And Horus knew that an outright war could not be won, and if he launched an attack with his 8 legions, he would eventually be overwhelmed by numbers alone. So Istvaan V was a way to consolidate all of his forces in one system and completely crush 3 legions with minimal casualties. The plan was genius, as the Greater Heresy had not broken out yet, so no one really kind of knows what's going on here. So essentially, by if he had said, "Hey, I'm the Warmaster, all of you convene in this one location," it would have definitely raised some red flags. So by placing people on both ends of the spectrum here, both loyalist and traitor, he's able to consolidate all of these legions in a very sneaky, very, very crafty way, and that's very true to the Horus we know. And it's important to note that no one knew the atrocities and horrors that Horus's legions were already committing. Seeing humans as unworthy of the Adeptus Astartes protection, the traitor legions used humans as tools or playthings. The Word Bearers were already, going down the path of demonic possession with the birth of their Gal Vorbach, or things like Blessed Children or Blessed Ones. And the Emperor's children were experimenting with which basically becomes Noise Marines. In the Fulgrim book, it talks about how Fabius Bile is essentially modifying some of the Emperor's children's higher up, the upper echelons, to basically emit high-pitched sonic waves to the point that it can kill people. And it was, all a grand taste of things to come. So when the fleet led by Manus Ferrus Manus, entered the Istvaan system, they are not met with an answering traitor fleet. And that's what was planned, that's what was thought. Okay, we're going to come into this system and immediately we're going to be under fire. So you see, the Istvaan system is strategically important to the greater transportation throughout the Imperium. It's far enough away from Terra itself and deep within the Segmentum Obscurus. Now, through this system, a large amount of stable warp routes reside. So it's basically kind of like a main crossroad for the sector as a whole. And this being the largest sector of the Imperium, you can see that it's quite advantageous to control this sector. Now, the Traitors Legions decided not to fight a grander space battle. And that's something that is unique because it is known far and wide that Horus is the master of, space combat. So they figured, okay, we're coming into this system, we're going to immediately be met resistance. Instead, they discovered that Fulgrim had built a mighty redoubt, and they, being the loyalist legions, discovered that Fulgrim had built a mighty redoubt on Istvaan 5, digging deep under the alien fortresses and mountainsides of the Urgal Plateau. And this meant that they could not be dislodged from orbit. They couldn't just bombard the planet and have them be eradicated. They had to land to attack. And this was totally fine for Ferrus Manus, because he was already extremely butthurt with Fulgrim. You see, these two have this kind of like super bromance, like borderline love. And like even above normal Space Marine standards, like they didn't just clasp forearms, if you know what I mean. Okay, they didn't have sex, but still. They both kind of, they crafted each other's respective weapons in this kind of grand challenge of their artisan abilities when they first met. Fulgrim tried to convert Ferrus Manus to Horus's cause, and it resulted in this immediate falling out and fistfight. So you can imagine that they're pretty pissed off. Big Daddy Iron Hand was ready for some righteous revenge. Now, upon Istvaan 5, the fleet would go, just as planned, directly into the Lion's Den. Horus is a brilliant tactician. That's why he is called the Warmaster. I mean, it's arguably the best in the entire Imperium. That and a number of other things why he's called the Warmaster, but we won't get into that in this video. So, before making planetfall, you have this really sort of mustache twirling moment where all the traitor legions that are in orbit, the ones that arrived with what's called the penal fleet, the fleet that's meant to basically bring Horus in, they all meet up on Logar of the Wordbearer's flagship, the Fidelitas Lex, which means the law of faith in an otherwise dead language, High Gothic. Now, here, Lorgar lays out the plans to the Iron Warriors, to the Night Lords, the Alpha Legion, with their respective Primarchs present. And it's worth noting that, again, everyone has their own reasons for getting involved in the Horus Heresy. Conrad Kurz believes in fear and terror as sort of kind of like this weird form of justice, and he has this really skewed sense of justice, and actually, he isn't this insane murderer, but more this tyrant that believes fear subjugates people. Think Vlad the Impaler, only, less impaling, more skin flaying. And this obviously ostracizes him from the grander Imperium and the Great Crusade. And same holds true for Alfarius and Perturabo and Lorgar. Each one holds a fringe belief that is catered to and nurtured by Horus. I mean, you could argue that Lorgar is the reason the entire heresy kicked off. He is, after all, the first heretic. And his fall from grace comes from him worshipping the Emperor, essentially, then getting his hand slapped by Bobby G and the Emperor, so it results in him having a pity party to go find the Chaos Gods. Now, that's a super watered down version of things, but I wanted to try and give you guys some perspective on why they're doing what they're doing, because we really didn't cover that yet. I mean, Conrad Kurz is seen as brutal and kind of like a fanatic in the sense that he is very devoted to his pursuit. And funnily enough, though, the word bearers used to be looked at as zealous for the Emperor, but after they get their little hand slapped by Bobby G and the Emperor, basically, literally, the Emperor backhands Lorgar and says, "Take a knee. Don't ever do this again. I've glassed your capital city on your favorite planet." And after that, Lorgar, in a sense, in a way to kind of and master subterfuge in a sort of way, he creates his legion, recrafts his legion, and it becomes essentially the consummate legion. Everyone kind of looks at them and the Dark Angels and goes, "Wow, these guys got it down pat." So he really did a really good job of hiding what his true intentions were. But again, to get back on point, Lorgar is essentially laying the groundwork for what would be the Imperium after Horus is what it's going to look like. He kind of fires everyone up, tells them, "Hey, you're going to have this portion of the galaxy. This portion is going to be yours, and here's how we're going to control everything." And I mean, it looks like a frat party with everyone standing around watching the first keg getting tapped, frothing at the mouth and all. Then, up stands Sevatar, the first captain of the Night Lords. Now, if you don't know anything about Sevatar, you're in for a treat when we cover him in our Night Lords video. Trust me, he's probably one of my favorite characters in Warhammer 40,000 lore. But he shouts something that becomes the war cry of every traitor legionnaire, every video game iteration of Chaos Space Marines. It was on the spine of the 4th edition book. Death death to the false emperor. And this is the seminal moment which becomes the true beginning of the Long War, as it is called. If you're familiar with the 7th and 8th editions rules of Warhammer 40,000, you know that you can be considered a veteran of the Long Wars. It's an actual, I guess, trait you can give any of your Marines that gives them certain benefits. Anyway, moving on. With the stage kind of like set, the invasion could begin. And you have the traitor legions forming a bulwark on the surface of Istvaan 5. Let's take a look at this map to get a better understanding of what that looked like. So you have the Sons of Horus and the World Eaters legions holding the northern portion of what is called the Urgal Depression. The Emperor's children, Death Guard, and remaining Sons of Horus decorating the rest of the line all the way to the south. And you have a large contingency of what can effectively be chalked up to Imperial Guard forces, if you want to consider them that. In fact, that's kind of exactly what they are. In addition, you have a Titan joining the fight, a Titan Legion, a massive Imperator class, one no less named Dies Irae. Seemingly, the odds are really stacked against the loyalists. Seemingly, that is. A whole entire Titan Legion is nothing to scoff at. But an opening volley from orbit smashes into the Urgal Plateau, shattering landscape all around Istvaan 5, in front of the Traitor Legion's position. And any emplacements or advanced troops would have been vaporized in that initial volley. And Fulgrim was crafty though, and he kind of knew that would be the first action. So having dug in deep with their fortifications, the opening salvo saw little to no damage being done to Horus's faction. And from the sky, drop pods screamed towards the surface in mass. For those of you guys who played Dawn of War 1, you can know this as the Steel Rain. But deeper down the depression, Stormbird landing craft begin to assemble and take position, dropping off more and more Astartes. And the entire valley is choked with Space Marines and Imperial Army elements, including large armored divisions. The spearhead was led entirely by loyalist forces in a kind of a three-pronged assault. And you have three legions making planetfall and first contact with Horus's forces. In the north, Corax's Raven Guard smashed into the World Leaders. To the south, Vulcan's mighty Salamanders squared off against the Traitor Marines and elements of the Dark Mechanicus. Then, in the center, was the wrathful Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands, which is funny because his name literally means Iron Hands. Whatever. Ready to kind of deliver fiery retribution to his brother Fulgrim, who held the center against the Gorgon's raging temper. Now, Ferrus Manus held command of the first wave of loyalists that made planetfall. The other legions would arrive to reinforce and relieve them, at least that was the plan. Now, this wasn't an engagement that included setting up a beachhead and slogging up towards the enemy. This was a brutal meat grinder of a battle. Horus knew exactly where the loyalists were going to land, and from the second that planetfall was made, the Urgal Depression erupted in a raging torrent of gunfire, war cries, and proclamations of brother. Now, the horrific melee that went down the entire battle line was a massive stalemate. Neither force really was able to kind of push the advantage against each other. You have this moment where tons of pent-up hate and aggression is being poured out all at once from the traitors, and the vindication of kind of like this justice coming from the loyalists. It's this insane clash of ideals. And in just over 2 hours, you have the death of over 10,000 Space Marines, as the battle lines would gain in one area and lose in another, for the progress to be kind of reversed minutes later. This constant ebbing and flowing. The undulating line of war was reaping a huge tally against both sides as brother fought brother. Now, at this point, the ante was upped, the scales were tipped. Loyalist macro landers descended from orbit, dropping Titan legions on the planet, Legio Ateris. Now, legions don't just like kind of descend from space like some falling Jaeger, Titans don't really descend from space like a falling Jaeger like in Pacific Rim. Nay, they are dropped in pieces, then assembled on world. So, committing even one Titan to an engagement is a huge feat, and a massive dedication to resources, but the Legio Mortis of the Traitor Legions was reaping a huge tally, and the Loyalists needed an answer. I mean, these things are huge, like multiple times larger than a skyscraper. and I guess kind of depending on the class, Imperator being one of the top ones. And they can crush Predator battle tanks just by, boop, stepping on them. Boop, oh, boom, you're blown. And not to mention, their armaments are so strong that they can blind onlookers with their own void shields as well. I mean, really, they're basically land ships. They're giant ships on land that walk around on 2 legs and have arms made of weapons. Like a cat. Like a cat has hands made of weapons. Just similar concept, but, metal. But the 2 Titan legions fought each other wildly, loud sirens blaring across the battlefield with each successful kill from the massive engines of war. And there's this kind of cool description in the lore that goes into detail about how the sirens are to signal the joining of battle, as well as what's considered an engine kill whenever one legion kills another, or one Titan kills another. It depends on what they do, like there's a reactor kill one and an engine kill, so every single thing has got a different horn accompanying it when it basically makes a successful kill. And it's that kind of over-the-top bromance stuff you hope to see in Warhammer 40,000, so I love it whenever I read it in a book. I'm like, oh yes, engine kill, sound that horn, sound that fucking horn. But the Legio Ateris went to war expecting to stall out the Legio Mortis, and they did just that. Mortis had both superior numbers and types of Titans. There's multiple types of Titans, like Warhounds, Imperator, Warhound being one of the lower end ones, Imperator being one of the larger, the bigger end ones. So Ateris was able to act as a shield for the Loyalists, facing the brunt of the Titan onslaught and destroying, and this actually destroyed, Legio Ateris is known as the Firebrands, and it destroyed them entirely. And this act still weakened the Legio Mortis enough, though, that the Iron Hands were able to bring down the remaining engines. And this is huge, because it allowed for the battle to be fought on a more equal footing. Being entrenched and supported by a Titan Legion is a huge difference, and a huge advantage between just, fighting on foot, slogging it out. And the neutralization really made the battle even more brutal, though. The Urgal Depression was now filled with Primarchs and Legionnaires tearing through one another. Corax running hit-and-run maneuvers against his traitorous brothers. Vulcan smashing apart Legionnaires with his mighty Warhammer, and Ferrus Manus leading the charge through the heart of the battlefield. On the other hand, you have the Primarchs under Horus exacting similar vengeance. Angren is like mulching through enemies with his chain axes like a crazy idiot. Fulgrim's toiling with the demon in his mind as he slays masterfully, like going, oh, I left the pit, what do I do? And Mortarion is reaping through foes with his gigantic scythe like some badass Grim Reaper. So this colossal 3-on-3 is about to get tipped heavily to one side, as the other legions begin to make planetfall from Starbirds and Thunderhawks. Now, that's important to note. Stormbirds and Thunderhawks, not from drop pods because drop pods are a one-way trip. You're coming down, someone's going to have to tow you back up. So let's keep that in mind as we go forward here. So looking to kind of spring the trap, the Traitor Legions started to move in a fighting retreat, moving deeper into the Depression to draw the Loyalists in. Corax and Vulcan, kind of vied for staying and waiting until their relief forces could come and, relieve them. But Ferrus wouldn't have that. And headlong he went. He just charged headlong into that damn battle and dragged his entire elite Terminators, the Morlocks, with him, hellbent on bringing Fulgrim, the Emperor's children, to heal. Now, the 3 Loyalist legions set up a defense around their already embattled brothers. The Iron Warriors fortified their position utterly, turning it into a makeshift fire base and crafting gun emplacements along the entirety of the battle line, because that is not suspicious at all. Why in any way would I think that is a suspicious act? I'm totally blind to it. The Word Bearers, on the other hand, set up on the north and south positions, bringing up heavy weapons teams and solidifying their hold on the Urgal Depression. The Night Lords and the Alpha Legion kind of fill that gap in between what is the newly arrived Loyalist and the current traitors that kind of fill that gap in between on the northern and southern most extremes of the battlefield. So entirely surrounded, the Loyalists don't even realize they're dead before the treachery unfolds. There's this really haunting moment in the lore that talks about the Iron Hands retreating, or it's not just Iron Hands, but it's mainly like everyone, retreating up the hill back to the Iron Warriors' position. And while they make their way up the hill, they go to hail their brothers on the Vox, and they wave them down like, hey, fucking help. And they're answered with the chilling silence of their brother legions arrayed against them at the top of their newly fashioned holdfast. And the answer is the newly emplaced artillery guns going off for the first time, marking the true depth of the betrayal, the beginning of the drop site massacre in its true form. From all around the Depression, the original traitor legions turned on the fully extended Iron Hands with renewed ferocity. The Salamanders and Raven Guard were beset on all sides, as well as the newly arrived 4 other legions were in their crosshairs. The end was rapidly approaching for the 3 truly loyalist legions. Vulcan and Corax kind of looked to any means possible to salvage the situation, you know, like, oh shit, we gotta get the fuck out of here. And they fight these kind of overlapping retreats to what remained of any landing craft in the area, anything like that. The Iron Warriors had destroyed a good amount of the landing craft that was already on the planet, so they kind of essentially knew what the hell they were doing, because they knew, oh, you came in through a drop pod, well, a lot of your Stormbirds are gone, don't know how the hell you're going to get back up to orbit. So the Raven Guard had already been bloodied, more so than the other 2 legions, and the casualties were starting to show as they were just cut down by combined traitor gunfire from all directions. So Corax and Vulcan had to make a break for it quickly. Ferrus Manus and his Morlocks, though, on the other hand, had pushed deep into the heart of the enemy position. And by the time the traitorous acts of his brothers had kind of unfolded, he was already face to face with his prey, Fulgrim. So he was already kind of like already way up against the wall there. So it's not like he said, oh, they've betrayed us more? Fuck it, going deeper. No, it was, he came up against Fulgrim, and then Fulgrim kind of mocks him as right as he arrives. You know, the massacre unfolds, or like kind of like simultaneously. And it's one of those moments where Ferrus is pissed because of the depravity of his brothers, but it's also because of his own hubris and his cholera kind of sending him into the red so far that he didn't see this coming. And Ferrus leaps at his brother Fulgrim, looking to end what he started. And now, I had mentioned that the 2 had a very close friendship before this, and they had even crafted 2 weapons for one another. So the Fireblade for Ferrus Manus, and the Forge Breaker for Fulgrim. And the 2 used these 2 weapons to try and end the other's life. And the battle is brutal and bloody, and it's across like multiple pages in the book Fulgrim, mixed in with a lot of like, how could yous, and you were supposed to be the chosen one, Anakin type monologues. And the 2 fight to this bloody stalemate, where they're essentially on the ground, trading blows between bitter words. And Fulgrim has a second weapon with him, a demon sword he gets earlier in the Fulgrim book on the planet of Laeran. Laeran. And this blade is whispering to him in the entire book, basically corrupting him, kind of saying like, hey, why should you listen to him? Why are you going to do that? Aren't you your own person? Aren't you a Primarch? Aren't you strong? Aren't you the Emperor's chosen children? So it's very kind of, in fact, when you're reading it in the book, you're like, God damn, could this thing shut up so I can hear more about brother on brother action? But at the final moment, when he can't deliver the killing blow to Ferrus, Fulgrim loses the upper hand because of his hesitation. He basically kind of has Ferrus on the ground on his knees, and Fulgrim just can't do it. He can't kill him. But after another kind of quick exchange back and forth, Fulgrim loses control of himself and uses the demon sword to behead Ferrus Manus in one fell swoop, killing his brother instantly. Ferrus Manus is the first Primarch to fall, and it's important because it shows that Primarchs are mortal, that they can die, that they are not the beings that their sons think that they are. And this actually shatters Fulgrim. And the blade says, you know, hey, you know, I can help. Let me take over. I can do this for you. And that's essentially what happens is Fulgrim is sitting there holding his brother's head, crying over his brother's decapitated form, blood spurting everywhere. And he kind of comes out of this malaise where he realizes what's going on. He looks around him and he goes, how did it come to this? How did I do this? And the blade literally says to him, I can give you the oblivion you seek. Because he says, you know, death is too good for you. You don't deserve death. You deserve nothing. You deserve, you know, white noise. And Fulgrim says, yeah, let's do it. Fucking end me, dude. And, you know, Fulgrim takes his defenses down and lets the demon take him over completely. And at that moment, he realizes his error. Because now he can see everything that unfolds, but he can't do anything to stop it. It's not the oblivion he had hoped, the black nothingness. It was a trick, a farce, a ruse. Fulgrim is now looking through the window of his own eyes that he cannot control. And that, if that isn't a terrifying ending to a Primarch, I would rather just have my fucking head cut off at that point. But neither here nor there, I suppose. On the other side of the battlefield, there's an entirely different and equally as bitter struggle going on. The entire Loyalist army is in full retreat, fighting their way out on whatever landing craft they can, whatever salvage, whatever escape that they can. Corvus Corax and the Raven Guard come full on against the might of the Word Bearers, a legion that was, again, thought to be the consummate example of what a legion should be next to next to the Dark Angels, like we said. And in truth, these were the first betrayers, the first heretics, as I said earlier. Lorgar, their Primarch, was flanked by his first captain, Corferon, who was actually his adoptive father, as well as first chaplain Erebus, the man who was responsible for the corruption of Horus. And if you have not read the books, you cannot understand how much hate almost anyone has for, anyone reading the books has for Erebus. He is a cock. He is not liked by traitor or loyalist alike. He is a shithead. But nonetheless, he is who he is. He can go to hell. The Raven Guard and the Word Bearers clashed as one fought to kill the other. And this is also the first time that possessed Space Marines are seen in the lore as the Word Bearers Gall Vorbak that we talked about earlier. They're slowly destroyed by a wrathful Corax as he slays through the Marines that allowed a demon to possess them. He gets incensed by this. He sees this and he's like, no, I don't. This cannot happen. This is base evil. This is debauchery. So Lorgar, in response to this, looks at it and watches his new prized sons getting reaped by Corax, and he goes to stop it. He does not want this. His other bros are trying to calm him down, like, three dudes at a frat party trying to convince someone not to call their ex when they're drunk, but, Lorgar gets pissed and goes headlong for Corax. But something to note here, Lorgar is not a fighter. Lorgar is really near the bottom with Bobby G, I'd say, in the lore, as far as, melee power level goes. He's very weak. And the lore even talks about how he thought of himself as a scholar, an orator, more than an actual fighter. So this engagement does not go well for him, even though he starts to unleash his nascent psychic abilities. He's been suppressing them for so long. Corax is just too fast and far too strong. He's even taller and mightier than his brother. Lorgar kind of struggled to get the upper hand, wielding this massive power maul. It's really the predecessor to the Crozius Arcanum, against the nimble lightning claws of Corax. Again, there's a lot of how could yous and don't try it's going on. I've got the high ground, that kind of shit. But especially since Corax is more of a wrathful angel against Lorgar, who's really just a kid by comparison. It's like he's fighting with a wooden stick. And eventually, Corax goes right for the gut, slamming his lightning claw through his brother's stomach and out the other end. Glancing his spine, kind of drags the claw upward, like gutting him more and more, before viciously ripping the claws out, tearing a chunk of skin and blood and organ with it. But this blood's kind of like just sizzling off the force field of his power weapon. It's really kind of, Warhammer 40,000, awesome, dramatic. But as Corax goes to deliver the final blow, his claws are caught at the last moment by another set of claws, by the Night Haunter himself, Conrad Kurz. Pale face met pale face. Raven met bat demon creature. Black eyes stared out with a rictus grin. Now Corax, realizing he could not beat Night Haunter in his wounded and one-clawed state, jets out of the fight to help his sons, which is good idea. Conrad Kurz is no slouch. When it comes to combat, he goes toe for toe with Lionel Johnson and wins, then loses, then wins. So it just kind of depends what situation he's in. But Conrad Kurz, in any book I've ever read, is just a madman, but is also prone to bouts of anger and extreme insanity, which kind of clouds his judgment. But we'll get into that more with this video. Conrad Kurz is not a fan, though, of Lorgar, and actually he hates him, especially for the whole kind of corrupted Space Marine thing. His saving his brother is more of a, let's not talk about this ever again, especially after seeing all the Gall Vorbak turning into full-fledged demon-possessed Space Marine hybrids. So he's just, he's not having that. And with that, Conrad kind of goes to pursue Vulcan and bring him in and actually capture him. So you have these 3 Primarchs who essentially get shattered at this moment. But this starts to really wrap everything up for us at the same time. Corax gets embroiled in a multiple-month campaign throughout the system as the traitors try to kind of uproot him while he deals damage to the infrastructure, delaying the traitorous legions. That's kind of the Raven Guard's thing, is hit-and-run tactics. How do we use guerrilla warfare against our enemy with a smaller force attacking a superior force? And that's his bread and butter. But he eventually makes it out of Istvaan and back to Terra to help replenish the Raven Guard. And he goes through a lot of, he talks to the Emperor. The Emperor says, well, hey, here's basically the thing that I used to create all the Space Marines. You can use it, but don't fuck with it, because if you do, you'll make some terrible, twisted, mutated Marines. Spoiler, that's what happens. So we'll go into that with his respective story, but that gives you an idea of what happens to Corax. The ships in orbit, though, leave kind of one at a time as they're being destroyed, or there's a hasty retreat, brings them out of system, essentially whatever they could do. And as the Salamanders leave on whatever craft they can, after they're losing their Primarch on the surface once he's captured by Conrad Kurz, as we just said. And that leads to a whole series of situations where Conrad's trying to break him, trying to kill him, finds out he's an immortal. Vulcan ends up on Caliban with the Dark Angels. On Ultramar with Bobby G and the Dark Angels, as well as Sigismund. Wrong game. Along with Sanguinius. And then he eventually gets brought back to life on his home planet. So there's Vulcan has a crazy history as well. We've talked about it in our respective Vulcan video as well. So we'll go into that in that video if you want to watch it. The Iron Hands, on the other hand, kind of scatter to the wind, just like the Salamanders. And once their Primarch falls, they're out of it. And it's really a huge turning point in the lore of the Horus Heresy, because now Horus's treachery is fully revealed, and it's monumentous. It's not just the small heresy it once was thought. And with this kind of masterful stroke, he tips the odds from being grossly outnumbered to being equal. In addition, he reveals that he has a whole half the Adeptus Mechanicus on his side as well. It's called the Dark Mechanicus, fighting for control of Mars, as well as all of the armaments available to them via Titans and other means that the Adeptus Mechanicus provide the loyalist legions. Every brother becomes skeptical of one another from this point on as well. And this is this divisive action that enables the loyalists' kind of response to be slow and to a crawl as they kind of root out to see which of the remaining legions are actually loyalist, while the traitors hurl towards their goal or / goals. It depends on who you are. And this is, again, exactly what Horus wanted. He has 3 broken legions that are trying to make their way back to any kind of respective home to honor their father's demise. It's really kind of, it's kind of emotional, because you have these books that talk about Damnation of Pythos, which is basically like a broken legion contingent, which is just Raven Guard, Salamanders, and Iron Hands fighting off proto-Eldar on this one planet, because it's like they were stranded on the planet. They're strung together by basically the bond of brotherhood between the 3 of them, and their dedication to the Emperor, and their dedication to getting this information back to the Imperium as a whole. So you deal with like 2 or 3 books that deal with these broken, splintered legions eking back into the Imperium as a whole, and they're really cool ways of doing whatever fight that they can bring to the traitor legions. They do it in any way, and it's a really cool kind of juxtaposition to the usual my legion fights your legion and we kill and die and brother clasp. So again, a really cool kind of way to do things here. But we were talking about the traitor legions kind of going to their different goals. So the Night Lords head out to the Thamas system to delay the Dark Angels, and the Word Bearers head to the Ultima Segmentum to attack the Ultramarines, and the other legions join Horus in their march towards Terra. So what you've done here is the Space Wolves, Fenris, that's where he's from, but the Space Wolves, after having dealt with Magnus the Red, are now so far away from Terra at the behest of the Warmaster that they can't make it back to Terra in time. No one knows where the hell the White Scars are at this point in the lore. No one really kind of, there's this constant wild card throughout the entirety of the books. Like, where are they? Whose side are they on? Who do they fight for? Where the fuck are they? And the White Scars at the same time, they don't know who the hell is on their side too. So you have a really interesting moment here where you're delaying as much as you can. You have all these other these pawns, these pieces in motion to delay stuff coming back to Terra to relieve the Emperor, and the Alpha Legion has infiltrated other legions to do some subterfuge, basically some space CIA action. Like the Alpha Legion infiltrates the Raven Guard to help find whatever the Emperor gives them to rebuild their legion to bring it back to Horus. So again, everyone's kind of got their own goals and ambitions that Horus has given them. But hopefully you guys got a really good idea for how important the Drop Site Massacre is, and why Istvaan 5 is one of the most important fights, and not just the Horus Heresy, but the grander 40k lore as a whole. It's the jumping point for the eventual Codex Astartes that reworks the legions down to chapters, as well as the complete alteration of the Grand Crusade. No longer is this the Emperor's Grand Crusade, now it's Horus's Crusade to Terra. Thanks so much for watching here today, guys. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment below, and I look forward to bringing some more 40k lore your way. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that kind of action and stuff like that, and we'll be touching on the Primarch Angren next. I promised that to some of you guys, especially Rich Roll, so that'll be our next 40k video coming out here soon. But have a good one, guys, and take care.